light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I'm Sister Who. There are so many situations in life in which I find, especially professionals of some sort, want to be automatically trusted. And I keep trying to impress to them that trust is earned. It's not inherent or given or granted. There were a number of people with whom I spoke, for example, who wanted me to select a primary care physician, and medical systems who wanted to assume that every doctor is as good as every other doctor. And so I wanted to do a meet and greet and meet the doctors and talk with them and get a sense of what kind of person they were and whether this was a good match. Because if I couldn't find someone who could communicate well with my autism, then probably they would not be able to be an effective doctor in any other way. Which kind of reminds me of the bumper sticker I saw on the back of a car that said, if you can't operate the turn signal, what makes you think you can correctly operate the rest of the car? And I found that very amusing. I try to always use my turn signal anytime I'm changing lanes or turning or anything, but I recognize that a lot of people don't, and so it makes traffic situations much more hazardous because I cannot automatically trust that they will do the right thing. And I have to look at their turn signal or that is not blinking and decide whether they really are turning even because of something else. Maybe I notice their wheels start to turn, or maybe everyone turns at this intersection, so they probably will too. And maybe they do and maybe they don't. If I assume that they will and they don't, we may have an accident or a near miss. There have been times, for example, where at a particular intersection, everybody turns right, even the people who don't signal. But what if somebody comes to the intersection who fails to use their turn signal and turns left right in front of me? We may have an accident and somebody may be hurt. So communication is very important. But communication is how we build trust. And the flip side to that, I guess, of course, is this difficulty of being of a betrayal of trust. That there may be people whom up until now I have always trusted, but then I entrusted them with something valuable. They dismissed it or treated it badly, and my trust was betrayed. And in some cases, it's very difficult to ever speak to that person again. In medical situations, the stakes can be considerably higher. One of the things that has come under question, and I mention this only as a topic of discussion, not as making a stand one way or the other, though I made my personal choice, but during the time I was growing up, there were a lot of dentists use what was called amalgam fillings, and some people think they're fine and some people don't. But the point is that amalgam fillings use mercury, which is horrendously toxic. And so then the question becomes, did this person facilitate putting something toxic inside my body, and does it have negative later effects? Some would say yes and some would say no. I'm not here to render a verdict on that, but the point is that the dentist wanted to be trusted. The dentist made a decision, and some people are now questioning that decision. If I were to question that decision, I had quite a number of fillings done when I was a very, very young child. So the decision was made by my parents, who were inclined to trust anyone in authority with anything. They grew up in an era in which the mantra was typically, the doctor knows best. Well, if you go back in time, there was someone who was a doctor who championed frontal lobotomies, essentially doing damage to the brain so that the person would be severed from their emotions and would go through life almost as if they had no emotions and a very flat personality because they were essentially brain damaged. The frontal lobotomies are no longer done, thank goodness, but if you go back even further, George Washington, the first president of the United States, was bled to death because the doctors at his time believed that the way to health was by draining off the bad blood. And so they tried to drain off all the bad blood, and in the end, George Washington didn't have enough blood left to live. That was done by doctors. And so we've moved to an era now, hopefully, where we recognize that doctors don't always know best. Doctors do their best. They have been through school. They have studied all sorts of things. They have reason to know more. But as one doctor in Australia commented, there are plenty of times where the doctors, well, as the doctor in Australia said, fully 50% of the time, his colleagues did not know what was wrong with their patients. And they could not say what was right or wrong or why, but they still had to show up and do their best. And that's where, because the person has to live with the consequences, to me, it is only right for them to make the choice. They have to live with the consequences. The doctor doesn't have to live with the consequences. Therefore, they should get to make the decision about which way which way things will be done, and to make the most informed choice possible. When I buy foods in a grocery store, I can look at the ingredients on the label and decide whether or not it has high fructose corn syrup. I personally choose not to use high fructose corn syrup. So if it has high fructose corn syrup, I set it back and I find one that doesn't. That's how I do my shopping. In a similar sort of way, if people are educated to know what are the good ingredients and what are the bad ones, they can look at the ingredients of a vaccine and decide, I will have this vaccine, I will not have that one, I will have that one, I will not have that one. Or they may decide, I will have this procedure, that procedure is not acceptable, that procedure I'll consider, but I'd like more information. All of these things have to do with how much the person trusts the person in authority, be it a doctor, an administrator, a parent, whoever it is. That person has to prove themselves trustworthy. And if they betray that trust, that is difficult, if not impossible, to ever rebuild. And it needs to be taken much more seriously than it usually is. There are a lot of situations, though, in which trust is betrayed that are never named as such, in which one goes to a situation or a particular address or a circumstance or an employment situation, and in that instance, something bad happens, and that destroys all the trust that the person may otherwise have in that area. The challenge then is to help this person heal, to help them rebuild their trust in something, maybe not the same thing or maybe not being done that way, to figure out why the trust was betrayed and what needs to happen so that it is not betrayed again. Not to assume it, not to expect it, but to give the person a chance to choose. Will you trust me on this or will you not? This is why I think you should trust me. This may be why you don't trust me. Or there may be a person, well, as Shakespeare said, methinks thou dost protest too much. The more times they say, just trust me, the less likely, of course, I am. I want to know, okay, and why should I trust you? And then to notice whether those situations, if they say, for example, I have this many years of experience doing this, and I would say, okay, and were those examples exactly like mine, or were they significantly different? If you had 20 years of experience fitting tennis shoes to people's feet, but I'm not shopping for tennis shoes, I'm shopping for Western boots. Maybe you don't actually know anything about Western boots, you only know about fitting tennis shoes. There needs to be some specificity brought to it. To say, this is why you should trust me, this is why you shouldn't trust me. There are times when I have said to people, I will do this for you if you want, but please be advised that I have never done this before. And if I do it, I'm bringing my best aptitude and ability and insightfulness and skill to it, but I cannot guarantee the results because I have never done this before. The amusing point on that crosses my mind is the character Jack Sparrow, played by the actor Johnny Depp, who made the comment, I don't know how to act my age, I've never been this old before. And the good side of that is that, of course, you can do things you've never done before, and you can try things that you've never tried before, that you've never previously tried. And the challenge related to trust and betrayal is choosing how to, as some people say, hedge your bet, how to make the attempt as safe and as well thought out as possible. That I've done it plenty of times, but if someone had never been in a canoe, to give them a life preserver to wear and to explain to them, I don't expect the boat to tip over because I'm an experienced pilot of a canoe. But just in case, I would like you to wear a life jacket because this will help you float if you wind up in the water. If the boat tips over and you wind up in the water, you will not drown. For myself, if I go out only by myself, because of my experience, I may choose not to wear the life jacket, but I am darn sure going to have it within reach. And that would be my personal choice. There are a number of places in which wearing seatbelts in cars is required. I trust my driving skills more than I trust the engineering of General Motors or some other auto manufacturer. So a lot of times I'm choosing not to wear seatbelts because the constriction goes against my autism. There are situations in which my environment is more hazardous where I choose to wear seatbelts. But I try to make it my choice. And I would rather that a lot more things be subject to choice rather than dictated. Rather than a police officer or doctor or somebody whom I don't even know coming up to me and saying, you will trust me, for me to instead say, can I make the choice of whether or not I trust you? Because at the moment I don't, but this is what I need to see in order to begin trusting you. To me, it varies from individual to individual. I have met doctors I would never trust, and I have met doctors I would trust implicitly. Thankfully, our medical system still allows for doctors to be human individuals, to make choices, express their personality to be one way or another. They're not all robots. In terms of retail, I once worked for a retailer that a number of wealthy people whom I've met have spoken very badly of that retailer, and I've explained to them that for me it's not about the retailer, it's about the corporate model or the corporate structure. That from my perspective, a corporation is a corporation is a corporation, and I find something inherently wrong with the corporate structure and with the corporate model. In spite of that, I still need to get certain needs met, and so I go into various stores, and the thing I have found in my experience is that a store is as good or as bad as the people who staff it. That I have found stores that were good not because of the chain, the retail chain of which they were part, but because the people staffing the store were genuinely trustworthy people. There have been instances also in which I interpreted that these were genuinely trustworthy people, and then I've had my trust betrayed, and I've never gone back to those stores again. And the challenge is not whether I go to this store or that one, however. The challenge is how do I get my needs met? And to do that, I need to find people who are genuinely trustworthy, who have been willing to invest themselves and take the time to earn my trust. And having earned that trust, to then maintain it by holding themselves to a standard that is more than just what's good enough. It's the standard of excellence, of doing your best. As Abraham Lincoln said, whatever you are, to be a good one. And I encourage people in whatever they're doing to strive for excellence, that it's not about just being good enough. It's not about just doing enough to satisfy. It's about doing the very best that you can, and in that, finding out, discovering whether you can whether you can in fact rise higher and create new opportunities for yourselves by being distinguished as someone who believes in excellence. And I recall the quote I've seen on a number of sitcoms actually on television, where someone will invite someone to bend the rules and just do it in a way that's good enough, and this is more convenient. And well, we don't want them to find out the truth because it will hurt them. And I don't know that any truth hurts as much as trying to correct a lie later. Truth is sometimes difficult and it's sometimes challenging. But there is a wholeness to it that can never be replaced by a lie. And in these sitcoms on television, someone trying to persuade a lead character into doing this or that really is not good. And in the case I'm thinking of, it was a man who responded to the person, the reason I'm not doing that is because I don't shave blindfolded. And I found that amusing at first, but the explanation is that because he doesn't have a beard, I think he did have a mustache, but because he doesn't have a beard, he has to shave his face, the lower part of his face, every day to keep the beard from growing in. And if he were blindfolded and shaved, that would make it easier to not look at himself in the mirror. But the basic point is that he has to look at himself every day in the mirror in order to shave. And the idea is that he could not live with himself. He could not, in good conscience, he couldn't respect the person whom he saw in the mirror if he didn't hold his behavior to a certain level. I don't know how many people take the time to consider that anymore, that you may live alone as far as other people. I live with my dogs, my service dog and my 2 ESAs, but I don't live with any other person at the present time. And so they wouldn't see me, but I would still have to see myself in the mirror every day. In order to brush my teeth, comb my hair, and use my electric razor, I have to look at myself in the face every day. And I have to look at the person, I have to look in those eyes in the mirror and determine that I can respect that person. That it's not a question of trying to exist as a person whom I no longer respect or love, but having sufficient respect and love for myself that as I go through my choices and go through the motions and choose to speak with this police officer and not speak with that one, and speak with this fireman and not that one, and speak with this administrator and not that one, and accept an offer from this employer but not from that one. And even in terms of selecting with which doctor I'm going to confer or describe what I have found and where my information stops. Do you know anything beyond that point? If this doctor is not listening to me, and I have had some doctors who don't listen and try to do their own thing, and I basically inform them point blank, no, that is not going to happen. I had one attendant at one receptionist recently talk about coming in for some test that involved hypodermic needles and such. And I said, no, you have the wrong record. That is not going to happen because that's not something that I respond to very well, and we don't have anything at the present time that warrants that kind of intrusiveness, that kind of victimization. And to them, that was simply a normal way of behaving. To me, it was something that is simply not allowed except in extreme cases. And there's lots of assumptions that like to be made about medications and blood type and all sorts of things. And so I try to be sure that people are aware also that I have A negative blood. Don't give me O positive because it is the most common type, because if there's one thing I have never been, it's normal. And maybe the norm is to expect trust and to trust every administrator, every teacher, every doctor. One doctor is as good as another. And I would immediately say, oh no, they're not. You have to know the individual. If you don't see the individual because you're chasing the categories, all doctors are the same. Well, no, not all doctors are the same. And the doctor with whom I'm in conversation now has confided quite openly that she is not a neurologist. And I had no problem with that. As long as we have truthful and factual information and fact-oriented information, we can decide how to respond. If I am trying to respond to a lie, any decision I make won't necessarily be the right one. And anything that they think is right for me without knowing me may not be right for me. It may be the wrong one. I don't know how many people really worry anymore, though, about being trustworthy, about being the sort of person that can be trusted, that when someone tells you something in confidence, you don't share that secret with anyone. And that when someone comes to you who is a little bit different and says, do you like this or do you not? That you be honest and objective, trying not to be discouraging, but if what they really wanted was someone to simply say, you're beautiful, they should have asked for that. And if they don't say, I'm needing encouragement right now, I'm needing something to build myself up. I mean, it was kind of like the time in one of my master's level classes where the professor asked for a comment on a particular type of assignment that was unique to her. And she turned to me and said, you've been in my classes before, what would you say about this type of assignment? And I said, how honest of an answer do you want? And the whole room busted up laughing. And someone who knew me very well, who was sitting about 3 or 4 people away, immediately interjected, well, in your case, about 2 levels below that. And the professor never asked me to answer the question. So I didn't have to. I didn't have to lie. But I did have to ask, how honest of an answer do you want? If a person is looking for encouragement, they should say so. And there should be enough familiarity to have that kind of conversation. That being said, there's also a difference between being tactful, such as asking how honest of an answer do you want, and just, in a sense, forgive the metaphor, vomiting one's response on the other person. Instead of just vomiting a response of saying exactly what you think, to instead ask, how honest of an answer do you want? Are you looking for encouragement? Are you looking for improvement? What are you looking for? And in that sense, we sometimes have to refine or clarify the question. And so we ask clarifying questions in order to know what exactly it is that the other person wants answered. In making that kind of clarification, they get a sense of how we think, and we get a sense of how they think, because they may ask, or they may clarify the question in a way that points in an entirely different direction. That this question is not asking how many times you've done this, it's asking whether you're a person concerned about this. It's like, oh, well, that's a different question. I'm trying to think of an example I read in a book where someone was trying to use a particular word, and ultimately the problem wasn't the understanding, because they were actually in agreement. The problem was the word they were using. It reminds me of when Sister Hu spoke to someone who was demonstrating at a gay lesbian pride event. And I thought it was a little bit odd that this man was standing so close to this LGBT event with this sign that said, I oppose gay marriage. And so after everyone is walking past 6 feet away, they're giving this guy plenty of room, and no one is engaging in conversation, I finally figured that Sister Hu, on behalf of the community, should be the one to break the ice. So I commented that it was rather odd for him to be holding that sign here. And so I began throwing out examples, and I said, so you would, if you believe that sign, then you would oppose going to a hospital where someone is not allowed to hold the hand of his life partner who has been injured in a car accident, even though that life partner may be dying. How do you be with the one you love in their final moments? And he said, oh no, I want them to be there. And we went through all these different examples, and he kept saying, oh no, I want that to be just what you say. And I said, so really, you're only concerned about the word marriage. You want them to call it anything else, anything but the word marriage, have all the same rights, all the same privileges, all the same everything, no double standards. You just don't want them to use the word marriage. And he said, well, yeah, basically yes. And so after we'd had this discussion, and everybody behind me, this crowd had gathered listening to our conversation, not wanting to get involved, but wanting to listen. And I saying, so really, what you need is a box kite that has, or a two-sided sign that has two opposite statements, so that people will understand you're not looking for putting anyone down. You're looking for debate and dialogue. You want to talk about these things. You want to wrestle with the issues. And he said, yes, I like debate. I said, well, I don't. I'm not a debater. I'm looking for solutions that work well for all people concerned. I'm looking for a world of no double standards, something where you can do what you need to, and you can do what you need to, and she can do what she needs to. And we can all find solutions that work, that genuinely, truly work. And so I explained that, no, I want to come to understanding. I don't want to have a debate. And if we can achieve a higher level of understanding where we can be friends, then I think we've won, that it's a win-win situation. That I understand all you're concerned about is language. And, 100 years from now, the words will be different and it'll mean the same thing. So I don't know if the words really matter as much as what do we mean when we say the words. And when people say words that invoke trust and then have every intention of betraying them, it's a fraudulent situation. No matter what words you put on it, it's fraud. And when the signature qualities of rape are violence and violation, and that these sometimes happen on a physical level and sometimes not, can we find healing, or is this a digression into something that will not provide the healing it promises?